My name is Mark Johnson. I am community editor at The Economist. What that means is that I am responsible for developing and for managing our social activity, both on our own website at economist.com and indeed around the wider web on third-party social networks like Facebook and on Twitter. So in this conversation about how to monetize social media, I'd like to talk in fairly practical terms, if you don't mind, about what we've been doing at The Economist, what's worked for us, why we've done what we've done, and importantly, of course, in terms of this conversation, what kind of value we feel that we're getting from it. And I'd also like to leave you with 3 recommendations, which hopefully you can take away, take back to your own news organizations, for how you can start to build a both editorially successful and commercially viable social media strategy. I think I ought to start, by way of introduction, just by saying that we don't feel at The Economist that the social media world is something that is completely brand new to us. In fact, for the 150 years that we've been writing, the ideas of debate, of discussion, of severe contest have been right at the very heart of what we do. Indeed, here is our mission statement from our very first issue many years ago, which is still published, actually, if you have a copy of the magazine, on the contents page. The Economist was first published in September 1843 to take part in a severe contest which presses forward and an unworthy, timid ignorance obstructing our progress. Now, I can hardly suppose that James Wilson, our founder, when he wrote those words, right at the very start of the one-way mass media age that we're only now beginning to emerge from, that he would quite have anticipated the way that I interpret his words today. But there is no doubt to anyone who takes even a vague interest in the internet that this severe contest is not just carried out on the pages of newsprint, it's carried out on the bulletin boards, the forums, the communities, the social networks around the web. And we feel that it's a core part of our mission to be involved in those conversations, those severe contests, wherever they may be, and indeed for The Economist to take a role in convening them ourselves. It's just as well then that I think there are 2 reasons why social media is quite a big opportunity for us in particular. The first is that we have an extraordinary audience of whom we're very proud and very lucky to have. Our readers are a niche bunch, but they are distinguished, they are intelligent, they are influential, they are, importantly, intellectually curious, and we wouldn't want to swap them with any other news organization in the world. They are an incredibly important asset for The Economist, and it would be a very bad idea for us not to try and find ways to showcase their wisdom and intelligence on our site and in the pages of our magazine. And the second reason is that The Economist, fortunately, is a brand that people believe in. It is a name that people trust. It's a name that people like to be associated with, and we hope that we can continue to be worthy of that trust. Here's something that Ezra Klein wrote in the Washington Post. He wrote that carrying The Economist is sort of like wearing a shirt that says, "I'm smart and worldly and interested in knowing things about Ghana." Now, is that a backhanded compliment? Maybe it is, but I also think there's a certain amount of truth in that. For many who read The Economist, there is already a sense that they are part of a community, and that gives us a valuable head start in this world and one that we're keen not to waste. So that's all very well. How are we building on this solid foundation? What value is it bringing us? And indeed, importantly, what recommendations would I give to you? Well, the first of my 3 prescriptions is going to be very simple, and I'm sorry if it seems banal. Invest the time and the energy, because that's all that's required, in growing your following on social networks as wide as it can possibly be. I have to say, when I was thinking about joining The Economist a year and a half ago, I read about the very lofty, very ambitious targets that they had even back then for the number of followers that they wanted on sites. And I'm delighted to say that we've smashed all of our goals. We've been exceedingly pleased with how well it has worked for us. We operate on Facebook, on Twitter, on Tumblr, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Those are our 5 main ones. We have on Facebook and Twitter, which are our largest. On Facebook, we have around 800,000 followers now. On the variety of Twitter accounts that we run, we have around 1.5 million followers. But how do we monetize that, if we must? What value is there in that for us? I think there are two things to mention here. The first is the traffic that sends us, if I'm going to be frank. And in that basis, the follower figures, I will admit, are vanity. People love to quote follower figures because they're the one number that never goes down. A far more important number to track, and the one that we follow, is the number of pages being generated on the Economist site by the traffic that is referred by those social networks. And we have very pleasing numbers on that metric as well. Facebook and Twitter, to give you some perspective, now generate around 10% of all the traffic on economist.com. That is 3 times what it was 12 months ago. It's 12 times what it was 18 months ago when our social strategy was in its infancy. So over that time, those social networks have been by far the fastest growing source of traffic to economist.com, and at a time when the traffic to the site itself was growing swiftly anyway. The second reason is advocacy. The problem for a lot of news organizations, and thankfully not for us, is that page views are actually fairly easy to come by, and it's harder to monetize. And that's a tricky problem, and I don't know if we'll come up with some solutions this afternoon. But certainly even then, the sort of value of sort of nurturing advocates on these social networks is not to be understated, even if it is slightly harder to put a clear monetary figure upon it. A lot of the eagle-eyed journalists that I work with look at our metrics and they say, why do we spend so much time posting on Twitter when indeed Facebook appears to be a far better way of driving traffic to our site? And the answer is that a site like Twitter is not about page views, it's about tastemakers. Twitter is for influential individuals. A lot of its content is generated by a small group of people who have very large followings and who are very influential. These are the kind of people, if you win their trust and deserve their trust, will do an awful lot of work on your behalf to spread news about what you're doing to people who may have only a vague understanding of who you are and what you do. And that isn't to be understated. And on that same note, different social networks are valuable in different ways in this regard. I spend some time posting Economist content onto Tumblr. I don't know if you know much about Tumblr. It's a swiftly growing American social network. It's one of the rising stars, I think, of the social scene. And it's currently peopled largely, as far as I can tell, by teenage girls. And it feels slightly absurd sometimes to be posting lengthy briefings on the European debt crisis into this near-constant stream of pics of Zac Efron and Justin Bieber. And yet, amazingly, we are extraordinarily well received there. And it's amongst the most rewarding parts of my job to see these people who we wouldn't naturally think of as Economist readers to be responding to what we do, even if often they're writing, OMG, I had no idea that Greece's debt-to-GDP ratio was so enormous. Lol, smiley face. So I was delighted recently to see someone on Tumblr in response to a post write, I am definitely becoming an Economist subscriber, and only slightly deflated to see that they'd added ... when I grow up. So it's easy to laugh about these things, but ultimately, these are the readers of the future that we are reaching, and the time and effort required to reach them is now less than it has ever been before. So that's my first prescription, social media. The second thing that I want to recommend to you is not to forget the social community right under your own nose. That's to say, the readers that are on your own site. Certainly at The Economist, we're pleased with the work that we've been doing here. So far this year, well, year on year, the number of comments on our site are up by around 30%, which is a fairly solid increase. A lot of that has been driven by the increasing enthusiasm with which our journalists have taken up blogging. There is now a much wider variety of content and articles on the site to which community members are encouraged to give their responses. What is the value in that community on our own site? Well, it's important that we keep giving numbers, that we keep proving that what we're doing is worthwhile. So how's this for a figure? Each month on economist.com, people who leave a comment, the comment contributors, view 6 times more pages than the average. People who contribute to our site are 6 times more engaged than the average passing traffic. You can argue over cause and effect here, I am sure. It would not be a surprise to see that people who are heavily engaged in our site are therefore also more likely to comment. But I think it's also true that a good site social strategy does play a role. That's to say, a good social strategy that has a range of participatory activities from the very simplest through to the very complicated does play an important role in taking that passing traffic of which the internet can supply so much and converting those people into readers, into return visitors, into fans, into advocates, ultimately into subscribers, if that's the way that you then choose to monetize your readership. And the second value we get from this community is quality. I think the only way to be certain of a successful future in the media is to make sure that what you do is of the utmost quality. I've already said that we have the great faith in the intelligence of our readers, and it would be criminal for us not to be taking every opportunity to highlight their contributions on our site. And we've set ourselves a high target. We want our readers to ultimately gain, when they come to our site, as much benefit from our knowledgeable audience as they currently do from our knowledgeable editorial. I don't know if we get there. I don't think that's true at the moment. But if we fail in that task, I certainly don't think it can be through lack of ambition. So to close, my third prescription, the third thing I would leave you with, and it's related to this idea that building community, building social media on your own site is also valuable. The third prescription would be to think beyond the article when you're thinking about community engagement. For so many news organizations who are still fairly new to community, it amounts to writing articles, opening up comment threads, and letting readers have their say on what you've decided they should be talking about. Doing that, as admirable as it is, and going no further, I think wastes the editorial potential that you might find in your audience. It also, in terms of this conversation about monetization, misses the chance to build commercial products that are valuable and particularly attractive to ever more advertisers who don't simply want to throw their logo at users through banner ads, but who, much like all of us sat here today, want to feel like they're part of a bigger conversation, want to feel that they're offering patronage to some kind of serious debate, some kind of serious discussion. So I think a good way to think about this untapped potential in news sites is actually the idea of the conference. In a generally depressed media world, the one thing that seems to be skyrocketing in value and popularity is the conference. I think you could probably spend your entire life going to conferences if the budget and your stamina allowed. And why do you go to conferences? I don't think you just come for the presentations, though I hope we haven't bored this afternoon. I don't think you just come for the Q&As that follow the talks, although in my experience those are often more interesting than the talks themselves, and we'll see whether that's true later as well. I think what you come for, as well as all of those, is the networking, the chance to meet and to talk to your peers. You come for the chance to discuss what you've heard over coffee, over lunch, for the debrief, indeed, back at the hotel. I think news sites are very good at doing the first of those things. They're very good at doing the presentations, because at the end of the day, they're full of articles. They're very good at having Q&A sessions, because they're very good at opening comment threads under their articles. But how can news sites take advantage of all those other things which are good about conferences? How can they connect readers together? How can they allow readers to talk about things that are related to what you write about, but not necessarily have to spur them on with an article of your own? I'm not sure what the answers to that are, and perhaps we can talk about it later. But those are the kind of questions that we're now wrestling with in my role, and I hope to be able to come back to you in a year or so with more concrete answers and hopefully some examples of some successes. In terms of products that are commercially and editorially successful, the final thing to talk about is our debates. I don't know if any of you have seen them. They're not brand new. In fact, they are actually one of the oldest community features we have on our site, around 2 years old. These are not lightweight things. These are not bite-sized pieces of content. They are not sound bites. They are 10-day online debates with an expert moderator, a hefty motion, and with expert opposers opposers and proposers who write proposal statements for us, rebuttal statements for us, and concluding statements for us. They are a big deal, and we do them on topics like, this House believes that untouched wilderness has a value beyond the resources and other utility that can be extracted from it. We do them on motions like, this House believes that the loss of privacy from digitising healthcare will be more than compensated for by the welfare gains of increased efficiency. There's a lot of received wisdom about what does and doesn't work in social media, about what does and doesn't work in community. And we've found that a lot of that isn't necessarily true, that you must be ambitious, you must not fall into the temptation of dumbing down when you're talking about social media. The sort of one thread, the one great discovery that's run through all our efforts so far are that if you ask a lot from your community, you will almost certainly get a lot in return. Thank you.